Hi, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In today's episode, we're featuring the DGA Special Projects Committee's recent event, The Craft of the Director, Mimi Leader. This series of conversations with master filmmakers features an in-depth discussion about the directing process, from pre-production through post. Ms. Leader has amassed a variety of directorial credits, including On the Basis of Sex, Pay It Forward, The Morning Show, The Leftovers, Shameless, and The West Wing. Please enjoy Ms. Leader's conversation with fellow director Jeremy Kagan in front of a virtual audience, wherein they discuss how instinct informs her visual approach and the process of reworking the original ending of On the Basis of Sex to include a cameo of Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Please welcome Mimi Leader. Mimi, it's great to see you here. Great to have you here. I've been lucky enough to have all of us who are binging at home. I've been able to have a Mimi Leader Film Festival, which has been quite amazing because your work, both as a feature film director as well as a television director, are just, it's pretty astounding work. So I'm looking forward to your sharing how you do what you do. But the first thing I wanted to ask you were, who have you learned from? Who have you been your mentors, and what have they taught you? And I know one of your mentors was your dad, but you've worked with many other directors, and I'm curious what you've learned from others.
Well, you learn everything from others, from watching their films to working with them. I was a script supervisor way back in the day on Hill Street Blues. And I worked with a lot of directors back then and, watched, what to do, what not to do. Oh, would I do it that way? And that was, I was very young and it was a really great learning experience. But I've had a lot of mentors. I've had a few. Steven Spielberg certainly mentored me and brought me into the feature film world. And, I've always been and I'm so grateful for what he did do for me, giving me the first DreamWorks film, The Peacemaker, which was a huge action film. And I, when he offered it to me, I was like, why are you offering me this movie? I'm not an action director. And he said, he said, you direct it every day on television and you can do this. And I said, all right, let me think about it. And I thought about it for about a second. And, he was lovely. And
what kind of advice did you get either from your dad or from Steven? Any specific advice that you might share if you were talking to a director who's working with you?
Yeah. I know that from my father, how to run a set. He ran a set on respect. And I learned that from him. And I continue to do that on every set I work on, and that was, I think, one of the biggest things. When my father made movies, he made 23 ultra low budget features out of his house, usually, and they cost $300,000 cash flow. He shot them on short ends. We all worked on them. My sister, who was 16, my father would cut negative with a cigarette dangling out of his mouth on the dining room table. And we were like, you can't do that. And he would just do what he did. And, I did every job on his films. I was a loader. I did everything. In fact, when I made my first short film, I shot it on short ends.
Right. When you said the word respect, can you define it? What do you mean?
Well, I mean that, you hire, there are all these talented people that you make a film with. You don't make it alone. And anybody who thinks you do, you don't. You have an incredible crew. You have your production designer, your cinematographer, your first, second, third ADs. You have your line producers. You have your makeup artists. You know what a crew is made up of. And you hire them because they're good. You hire them because they're going to bring something to this party. And they're going to bring their passion. They're going to bring their expertise. And so when I mean respect, I say, I really listen to what my production designer has to say. When we talk about a palette and I say, I want to make this, I want blue to be the predominant color of this movie, or I don't want any red in the movie, or whatever it is. We talk about those things like why and what does the blue bring out? And so, directors hire great artists to create art together. And that's what I mean by respect. It's listening.
Got it. Listening. I want to talk about a couple general things and then go into very specific moments in the movies, if I can, and television shows. But the first thing I want to talk about is the issue of resilience. When things don't go right for you, whether it's a job that you wanted and didn't get, or it's a job you got and wish you hadn't, or whether it's a day on a set and you wanted this particular thing and it didn't happen. How do you bounce back? What is your way of resilience?
Well, another thing my father taught me was, you just stand up and you put one foot in front of the other and you just keep going. Resilience comes from, I guess, a deep passion to make something, to tell a story, to live, to survive. And so, for example, when I went to movie jail after Pay It Forward, it was a failure at the box office. And even though it became part of the American vernacular, and a lot of people did like the movie. But anyway, I went to movie jail and I couldn't get a movie for years. And, but I kept working in television and I did 10 pilots, six of them went to air. The point is that you've just got to have something deep inside of you that makes you want to get up in the morning and tell the stories that you want to tell. I mean, resilience is surviving, right? It's a lot of things.
I'm going to pick up on one more beat here. When you're the night before you go to, you've come back from the set. It's been a rough day. What do you do that evening, and how do you prepare for the next day?
When you've had a rough day?
Either way, yeah, or a good one. But let's go with the rough one first.
Well, every day is like the first day. And, the first day, though, is always, even though I've been directing for 33 years, I still do the same things I did before. I do shot lists. I type them up, actually. I do it myself.
Oh.
I have an assistant do it. And I just do it because it's something I started doing when I was very young. And I rarely ever look at the shot list unless it's an action scene and there's a lot of pieces and I've storyboarded, because I already know how I want to shoot it, what I want to shoot. And then I have to just do it. It's like my security blanket. It's like, check, I did it. But I really like to remain open because I can shoot a scene. You can shoot a scene several ways. And I always have that in my arsenal, in my mind, like, I could shoot it this way, I could shoot this way, but this is how I want to shoot it. And then when an actor comes, when you bring in the actors, sometimes things change and for good reason. And, you talk about, here's the staging I'd like, and here's what would you like to do? I just leave it open. And it usually...
Do you get a good night's sleep?
Do I get a good? No, never. I start sleeping when the calls like go to like 9 o'clock. I really like split days.
Got it. I love that. And what's the first thing you do when you get on set? Usually
I go right up to my first AD who's on the set. And I've been working with Annie Berger for a long time. And Ann Berger's a great first AD, and I usually just go up to her and I give her a hug. And I know I can't do that anymore, but I usually go to the set and hug everybody. And just good morning, look them in the eye and how are you? And here's what we're going to do. And just talk to each and every person who's around and, clear the set for rehearsal, check in with Annie. is everybody here? Are there any problems? And I usually sit right in the center of the set. And I don't know why. I'll sit like where an actor's going to sit. I don't know. It's just comfortable.
When you're approaching, let's work with ADs. What's that conversation you're having with Annie? What's that conversation you're having with AD if that's the first conversation you're going to have?
Well, is everybody here? Is everybody here on time? Are we going to have our rehearsal at 7? Sometimes, okay, we're not going to have a rehearsal. Someone's late. Okay, here's the setup, guys. And, you give them the setup and, you talk about the day. Here's what I'd like to do all day. I hand out a shot list. Even though I don't look at it, I give one to my AD and I give one to my DP because, I work real closely with my first AD and my cinematographer. And Michael Grady has been my partner for a long time. Since we've done a lot of things together, but I brought him back onto The Leftovers. Anyway, I like to get a script. I like to go to the location, find the locations, and I like to block very quietly with them.
Interesting about the AD's responsibilities are obviously double. One is production. Can we get this done when we said we were going to get this done? And how do we do that? And how would you schedule it? But it's also dealing with all of the background artists that you're going to have. And you've had some really, really big scenes. In Peacemaker, there were the scenes on the streets in New York, sort of that last finale, I guess, of season 2 of The Leftovers, all those people in that sort of makeshift town that's right under the bridge. Yeah. How do you, what's your dialogue with your AD and ADs about how to make those things work? And let's start with the New York one, because there's so many shots, both long shots, sometimes your characters are in the midst of groups of people, obviously the running shots where they're going from various streets, in the city. How do you work with your AD to accomplish what you want?
Well, Peacemaker was a while back, but I'll try and remember. That was quite a sequence, the sequence on foot. And we did it first. It was the first thing we shot in the movie, which was crazy because we shot the film in Slovakia and Macedonia, the main portion of the film. And then when the nukes were coming to New York, but we had to start in New York. So I blocked the entire sequence, first picking the location, then blocking it with my AD so he could schedule it the way it needed it to be scheduled. Like, for example, the big chase sequence where there are all these taxis and George Clooney is running, and he jumps on the taxis and starts jumping from one taxi to another. Well, that was on 42nd Street on a Sunday afternoon, and we shut it down all day. And so we knew that day was devoted to all that, running up the stairs, running into the kids, running around the corner. And, we also kept our locations very close together so that we could move quickly.
And when you were scheduling, for example, in those running shots, did you storyboard them? How did you figure out, well, I know he's going to jump up on this cab. I know he's going to slide in the front of this one. I know he's going to knock down this person. How did all of these things emerge so that when you were there for that only one day to do all that, you could accomplish it?
That sequence, I do not remember storyboarding. That sequence was I just blocked it and knew what I wanted to get. But there are a lot of sequences I do storyboard, like, for example, this sequence in The Peacemaker where the nukes are in the truck and we're on the bridge and they blow up the truck and the truck's dangling over the edge. Well, that was absolutely storyboarded, and I had 2 bridges, and that was in Macedonia, where we shut off at this main artery for 2 weeks. You can't do that in Malibu Canyon, but anyway, you can do it in Macedonia. And it looked just like Malibu Canyon. And I had a smaller bridge where I did the action with the actors, fighting in the truck, hanging over, the guy dangling on the rope. the nukes, and the main big stunt we did, of course, on the main bridge. And, and also the crashing of the truck was on the main bridge. And that was storyboarded. And that, as everyone knows, that you have these, storyboards, and you put them on a big board, and you really figure out how to shoot them, how you have to shoot them. The story dictates how you shoot them. You have to crash the truck first to get it into position. And then, for example, it was very important to shoot, the fight sequence first. Clooney getting pulled up by a rope. I don't remember the exact order because it was a while back, but it's all very planned.
Let me jump to sort of maybe the leftover, that scene with also bridge scene. And I'm interested again, just specifically talk about the ADs and how you get your background artists to do what you want. How do you
well,
work?
Anne Berger's a genius. If anyone wants to work with a genius, she's the greatest scheduler on the planet and one of the most decent human beings on the planet. And anyway, we blocked the scene, and I think we shot this finale in 10 days, which is absolutely insane when you look at it. And we shot in the encampment on the bridge for 3 days. And I know that we shot the drone shot at the end. And it was the first time I'd ever used a drone, because I believe we shot this in 2015, because I think I went to Australia in 2016. But so that was last. I knew I had to do that last. And I didn't have 250 extras for the entire 3 days, because you're on a television budget. Even though it's an HBO budget, you're still on a budget. And so all the big wide shots I had to do first, like getting them on the bridge. And then we worked our way backwards in terms of when I needed less extras, and we scheduled it that way. But we also scheduled it for performance, because I wanted to follow, the arc of Nora, losing the baby, having the baby snatched from her. And that was a tricky sequence, working with triplets and having Carrie Coon, a brilliant actress, running with a baby in some shots, then take the baby out, put the dummy baby in, and then running onto the bridge. And then we have this sequence where the woman who stole the baby has dropped the baby, and the baby's in the middle of this bridge. So, we have to schedule how we do that. So we put the baby on the bridge. We did plate shots from all angles that I was going to shoot the other sequences. And then I shot it for real with Carrie Coon, with partially some of the baby in it, and then some with the dummy baby, and then we replaced. But that's all very intricate scheduling to get it done and get it done on time. And you're losing your light, and you're working with 250 extras who are hot in 100-degree weather. And
were all the extras in I'm going to go back to Peacemaker for a second, on the streets of New York, were all, because there's some really big crowd scenes where both Clooney and Nicole are in the midst of them. Were they all background artists that had been hired by the company, or did you mix them within real people, or how did you handle it?
We hired a lot of extras. Because we had a lot of extras and stunt people in there when they were running through the streets to protect them. And yeah, people would fold in. They always do. And and it's always a challenge, especially these days. It's super challenge with movie stars, and you're on the streets of New York, and they just want to walk up, and they can legally do it. And it's really
a problem. Let's talk about working with actors, which, in many respects, that is sort of the primary function of directors. And I'm interested in a general question, what you've learned, because you've worked with some major stars and you work with newcomers, you work with children. If there are any general things that you would say, this is what I've learned about the entire subject, and then I want to talk about some specific scenes and specific work. But any general ideas about how you approach working with actors?
Well, first of all, I think actors are usually really smart people. They're really smart and most of the time big-hearted and come from great instinct. And I always listen to an actor's instinct, but I always listen to my instinct as well. Like, for example, I don't mean to jump into something you don't want to talk about, and this isn't really a performance piece, but Scott Glenn, when we went on our journey together in the Outback with Crazy White Fella Thinking, he had to kill a snake, right? And it was a real brown snake, and then we had a fake snake. And I wanted him to kill the snake in a certain way, right? But he wanted to kill the snake his way. I want to kill it this way. But I explained to him, okay, but here's the big picture. In the season 2 opener, we did a cave woman sequence where this woman is, it's 20,000 years, I don't know, cave woman, cave time. And she gets bitten by a snake because she has a baby, and she's on a tree getting an egg from a nest. There's a snake crawling on the baby. And then she comes down and she starts whacking this snake, right? And she gets bit by a snake. And I wanted him to be bit the same exact way because I was looking at the big picture of the arcs of all 3 seasons, of those 2 seasons anyway. And then he got it. And there was no yes, let's do it that way. But actors, the way I work, I often, different with TV and film. Film, you have time. Like I had rehearsal with, on the basis of sex. I don't like to have a lot of rehearsal, but we read through each scene. We talked about each scene, but I didn't want to really set anything, or I didn't even want to really work on it. I just wanted to talk about it. Here's what this scene's about. What do you think you want in this scene? How are you going to get it? And so my approach is always from the character's point of view, each and every one of them. And then, of course, then the director comes in, me, saying, okay, this is how I'm going to shoot it. Am I going to shoot it from her point of view, or is this his scene? Am I shooting this from his point of view?
You were making a distinction, right? That, by the way, I'm so glad you used that word. What does this character want in the scene? But you were making a distinction between the time that you had in film or have in film, like in Basis of Sex, versus TV in terms of working with actors. What's the distinction that you see?
Well, you have very little time they were just strong actors. And one of them I had actually worked with on Deep Impact. And he reminded me that I cut him out of the movie, which was, I'm really sorry, but you're here now. It happens a lot, or it happens some. It doesn't happen a lot because there's no time.
Right.
There is no time. You have your, whatever it is, 12 days to shoot, 10 days to prep. Everybody's working. The train is running. And so what the difference is in television is I do talk to the actors about, okay, let's talk, here's what the scene's about. We all know what it's about, right? And I don't give them a lot of direction ahead of time because it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't intellectualize what the scene's about. We talk about what the scene is about a little bit. And then I start giving direction. Let's lay it down. Let's put it up there. Let's throw it out there. How's it feel? What's it look like? Okay, here's what we got to do. You see it and then you modulate, you fine tune,
Let's talk about a couple of very specific scenes because of that amazing Australian episode with Scott Glenn. There's a scene at the end, I guess it's the actress Lindsay Duncan, who gives this rather long speech in which inevitably she breaks down. I don't know if you remember, what that process was working with that actress, whether this was very clear that you're going to break down in this scene, or I'm asking.
Yeah. So she is one of the greats, Lindsay Duncan. She's extraordinary. And so we did talk about the scene, what it was about. And then we did talk about.
And when you say what it's about, can you give me an example? Suppose I were her at this moment. What would you be saying to me if you were saying what this scene's about?
Well, yeah, this is a really hard scene to explain what it's about, honestly. I mean, it's about a woman who's lost her children, she thinks she once thought, to the rapture. She finds out that her children actually did not die in the rapture. The bones were found on her ranch. And when she finds Scott Glenn, he's lying under the cross where they were found. And she found in his pocket this is what's hard to explain. She finds something that's very telling. She's a woman of faith. And she never went and looked for her children. And she did some horrible things. And so we talked about, okay, this is what happened. This is a woman who's filled with shame. She's filled with grief. She's filled with loss, and she decides to tell Scott what her story is. And we all have stories. And I did say to her, we all tell ourselves stories so we can get by. And she had a story that, but the story wasn't working anymore because she found him. And so, I did say, I want you to try and hold back your emotions as much as possible. But when it does happen, if it happens, let her rip, just feel it, contain it though, simple, just keep it set. I wanted the scene to be very simple and certainly because I was shooting it like this, and it was big enough, the words were big, everything was, the emotions were huge. Anyway, so
do you remember how many takes you might have done with her? Because this is really, this is the specificity that I find enormously helpful in trying to learn.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I shoot with 3 cameras a lot because I like to. I don't like to wear out the actor as well in a scene like this. I mean, this was probably an 8-page scene. It was long. And she did it all at once with no breaks. And so I wanted to have like a medium over. I wanted to have a front close-up, and I wanted to do a couple of different profiles from low, and I wanted to do a straight on profile. Anyway, so I would say she did it about 3 times.
Got it.
And
was she consistent? Do you remember that she was able to sort of do what you had asked her to do?
Yeah. Yeah, some were more emotional than others. There was another take that was even far more emotional, but it was too emotional. You know what I mean? It was too much crying. It was too much. You couldn't get through to it. You couldn't actually let it affect you. But when it's there, and you've just got to know when to let go and say, okay, we got it. And that's really scary because you can get so many different things. And, it's funny with actors. Some actors really love to do a lot of takes, and some 3 and done, like with Nicole Kidman and Clooney. Well, I knew from working with Clooney that he was a 3-take guy, and he would do 7, but he really 3, and he's really giving you everything he's going to give you. And Nicole really loves to explore, and I'm not saying George doesn't like to explore. It's just that he explores within those short takes, or within a smaller amount of takes. And Nicole could go on 25, 30 takes. And I learned something so we had done the whole sequence of them running through the streets of New York. And then we went to Bratislava, Slovakia, where I shot their first scene dialogue scene on an airplane where they're flying theoretically over to wherever they're going. And, I was like, who do I go with first? Okay. And even though I had worked with George, I was like, okay, ladies first. Let's give it to Nicole. Well, it was just like she just wanted to keep going, and out of respect. And my first scene with her, I was going with her. And I knew it was killing George. I knew it was killing him. And 3/4 of the day is done. And I started shooting with him, and there was nothing left. And I wrapped, and we shot him the next morning when we were fresh. Stuff like that you can't do in television. You know what I mean? You don't spend 3/4 of a day on a simple scene like that. But
the performances in Morning Show, and particularly in the finale of the Morning Show, which it's a pretty sort of amazing by both women. I'm curious how that, though, a couple sequences, obviously the very final sequence, but there's a sequence on the street with the two of them. It's a walk and talk where it's what was the process? Because they delivered for you, and I'm interested if there were things that you could tell us about your process with that.
Which scene? The walk and talk?
Mm-hmm. Let's do the walk and talk first.
Okay. The walk and talk. Well, it's in like working in New York on the streets at 10 p.m. With two movie stars is just like, it's very difficult. You've got crowds, no matter how late you go, they're coming. They know you're there. The paparazzi knows you're there because they see from the location alerts who's there. And so it was very difficult. There was security everywhere. So what looks like a very simple walk and talk down 54th, I think, onto Fifth Avenue, a very simple walk and talk with a Steadicam, was really difficult because we really had to ask paparazzi to step back when we rolled around the corner. We had to have our security controlling the people, the people who want to just watch. And it was difficult because even though you have a permit to shoot, so there's a lot of interference. So you just have to keep going. And you have a great 8D team, like I did with Annie Berger and her team, and a lot of security, and you get through it. And you have actors who are completely focused. Okay, we're not going to, that's why they have security. They're dealing with it. Let's just focus on the scene. Is it working? And so, we really just focused on that scene, with Aniston trying to get Witherspoon to come back to the studio. And then a guy comes by with his camera and wants to take pictures, and Aniston loses it with him. And we shot it really quickly. I stayed on the Steadicam. I had another camera grabbing pieces. I had two people handheld. I had two cameras handheld.
But with a scene like that, when you first rehearse them before the walk and talk itself, meaning that because there are a lot of emotional beats in that particular scene, how will you work it, or are you? And then how are you going to know where it's going to go on the Steadicam and where it's going to stop?
Well, between takes, I run and I say, I really want you to hit it here. I really want you to emphasize this moment, depending on what it is direction you want to give. I'm just constantly in contact with them saying, could you, whatever the direction is, it's just constant communication and a lot of trust. And
it's interesting with the multi-cameras, since you like 3 cameras, where do you position yourself? Particularly if there's an emotional scene that an actor is going to be. I mean, obviously there are monitors for all these cameras. Where are you?
You mean on the street or on a set?
On the set, primarily. On the street, I'm sure
well, I'm pretty close to the actors. I'm pretty close to. I don't like sitting in other rooms far away from actors. So I'm either on like little monitors on set right there, so I can see them, and I can also see what's going on. And I have, like, if I'm doing 3, I have 3 little monitors or 3 big monitors, depending on where I am. And, I came from the school, believe it or not, where, I used to direct without monitors. So, so did you. And, and there's a great discipline to that in terms of, being able to really look at your actor, really get on that camera, ride the camera. I can shoot a camera because I know how to do the wheels. I know how to shoot because, well, I studied to be a cinematographer, but because in those days, God, it sounds so long ago, but it actually wasn't that long ago, but maybe it was. In order to set up a shot, you really would have to put your eye in there and walk around with the camera or be on a dolly and see the shot so you're getting exactly what you want. Like I used to ride cranes.
And it was fun too.
That was really fun. I used to ride helicopters too, but those days are done.
Got it. Talk about working with Max Schell and Téa Leoni in the end of Deep Impact. I'm curious how you might have described the scene to the two of them and what it was like to have it, because this is obviously one of the more important emotional moments of connection in the story.
Well, that's an interesting story about this because the original script had thousands of people on the beach, had people like a party on the beach, people, the waves coming, come on and get us. We're just going to enjoy the last moment of our lives. We're going to surf. We're going to, it was very carnival-like. And I never really bought it. And I asked, are you going to give me thousands of extras? Well, no, you can just plate it, do a lot of plates and a lot of people replacement. And I was like, I didn't want to do it. I didn't believe it. I felt so I called Stephen and I said, Stephen, I really want to shoot this with nobody on the beach. I want her to go to her home, her childhood home. And she's coming to her father to say goodbye and to reconcile with him. I said, I want them alone on the beach, kind of like on the beach. Nobody's there. And they know they're going to die, but they're going to die alone together. And I just thought it was much more beautiful with the wind blowing. And so that's how we shot it. And, he was like, go for it. And I did. And it was really funny, though, shooting that sequence. So we did the emotional part of the scene where where she comes up and he says, I once dropped you on your head. And, then she tells him who remembers, there's this picture that
she denied. She didn't know, but she
remember. But she tells him, I remember the picture. I remember it well. And it was right there, and the frame had them in it and the house in the background, just like the picture. And so then we did the scene where she says, Daddy, we did the emotional scene, but when we had to do the big wide shots and then looking at the wave and the crane up and down shots, as if imagine they're just staring. We didn't even do it with blue screen. We just did the cranes going up and down. Imagine the wave is coming. I mean, it just was like we laughed a lot. It was ridiculous, It was funny, so we just had a lot of fun. And then we got rid of the laughter and then we did it. And the result is it works pretty well.
Yes, it does. It's interesting about sort of the relationship that characters have before the story you're telling. And so, here's a father and daughter who are estranged. And I'm interested in, if you had time with them, what you talk about, if you talk about what happened before this story happened. I guess a really good example that in terms of actors understanding it is the relationship in basis of sex between Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her husband. I'm wondering, because the relationship already, well, in their case, they meet and then, but the relationships exist before the movie starts. What do you do to, or do you help an actor or actors to sort of know, wait a minute, that's information we need to know or live, or your experience.
I mean, we do it in television and we do it in films as well. I usually write a whole, like, here's your life story. And I do it with the writer, like we talk about what the background is. And then I sit with the actor and this is what I think your background is, this is what I think you've gone through. And, they also do their own. And, then we come up with, okay, this is the arc of who you were before this movie started. And here's the arc of where we're going. And with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, though, we had a real life person, a real live Supreme Court justice. And, that was really, really, something, meeting her and going to dinner with her. I mean, meeting her in her office and then meeting her for dinner the next night and then going to her apartment and her showing me all her pictures and, me asking her questions like, how did you know Marty was the one, and, you're asking someone, not just someone you just met, but you're asking Ruth Bader Ginsburg, how did you know that your husband was the one, and she's a real gal and, she, he really looked at her, he looked at everything.
When you said you got to meet her, when did you decide, or did Felicity, and how did you both handle the idea of, okay, here's a woman, she has speech pattern, she has her own look, she's, obviously the imitating, how did you guys create?
Yeah.
Create.
At one point, I brought Army and Felicity to her chambers, and they met. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was quite taken with Marty because she's a little boy crazy. And she just loved him. And she gave him a cookbook that all the Supreme Court justices' wives had made when he died. And it was sort of all his recipes and all his and all these memoriams for him. And I noticed that I said, Phyllis, don't worry. She's paying attention to you. You know what I mean? It was like, she was all over him. And I said, don't worry, we're going to get yours. And, just kind of me being a mama going, don't worry. Anyway, Felicity, we never set out to do any imitations, any accents, just, we actually had to do an accent because she's British, and we decided on a mid-Atlantic accent, and she had a dialect coach. And we didn't want to do an imitation, but what we wanted to stay very true to the period, because we were in 56, we were in 59, and then we were in 1970 and 71. And so costume design was very accurate, hair design, very accurate. And I felt really good. Really great. Isi Musendin, beautiful costume designer, built a lot of those dresses for her. But anyway, the only thing Felicity wanted to do that was physical was she wanted to change her mouth a little bit. So she put in, not plates, what are they called? Little.
She changed her teeth.
Yeah, she put in some coverings on her teeth, like crowns. Like, I forgot what they're called, just slightly to make her mouth a little bigger. Because Ruth has a very big mouth with a big smile. And I think just that one little thing she did really hooked her in. And she actually had them put in she actually had them glued in for the show, for the movie, for the run of the movie. Because she had the kind where you just slip in and you could hear a lisp. But anyway, that's the one thing she did do. She did a little augmentation to her teeth. And Felicity, I introduced them. I brought her to the apartment, and then I left. I left her alone. I said, I want you to have some alone time with Ruth and get to know her. And they did. And, Ruth, Justice Ginsburg, I don't mean to call her Ruth, loved her. and loved her performance and had a lot of respect for what she did.
That the transition between what I'll call frustration and anger, and then a kind of reason and empowerment in that last scene in the courtroom. Can you talk about how the two of you evolved that? Because they're real transitions. She comes in one way and it's not working, and now she chooses another way.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how you evolved that.
Well, I said to her also about the big speech, I said, okay, I'm going to shoot everything. I'm just going to start shooting. And it doesn't matter if I'm on the judges or if I'm looking at you guys, but I'm breaking angles, whatever. Whenever you want to do the big speech, you just give me 20 minutes morning and we'll get there. And I said, we probably won't get there till tomorrow. It's fine. No pressure on you. Because it was a big speech to do. It was another, I think, 8-page monologue. It was huge. And I think it's one of the longest monologues ever put on film by a woman. And so we're shooting midday, and she goes, Mimi, I'm ready. I went, oh, okay. Went to my DP. Okay, let's turn it around. 3 cameras, boom. And her first take was extraordinary. I mean, we had talked about it. Everybody was, there was applause, tears. And I had her do it a couple more times. And obviously I did a lot more angles. And she nailed it. And she really, I feel, captured the essence of who Justice Ginsburg was as a young woman, which is very different than the woman she is today, even with her voice. Like, we have no recordings of Ruth's voice when she was younger, only from the swearing in and the recordings at the Supreme Court. That's all we have. And it's a very different voice, a young voice and an older voice. So we worked on that. She worked on that.
How did you look at that scene on that 8-page monologue when you were, before she did it, when you're looking at it? Because, as I said, it's not one theme. It doesn't go like that. It goes like this, and then she's got to regroup. And I'm interested in your work as the director, thinking about this before she said she was ready.
Yeah, well, she and I had talked about those moments. We had talked this scene through, and we had rehearsed it a little bit. There were places where I needed her to go down, where I needed her to gain strength again. And I don't quite remember the exact moments, but, it's what I always do. If I want something, I'll go right, I go up to the actor and I whisper in their ear. And I'm very private in terms of directing, actors. I don't like to yell things. I don't like other people to hear. I think it's absolutely personal and private. And, I would say at this moment, I would like you to try and whatever it is I'd want her to try and do.
In the this is jumping in that same scene, but it's a casting question, because the 3 judges I think are fabulous, and I don't know if you remember casting them, but if you do, can you share that?
Well, sure. I mean, one of them's my husband, so that was easy to cast.
Are you sure? How many times have you guys worked together?
A lot.
Okay.
It's always if there's something great for him, a part that he's right for, he'll do it. And he's a wonderful actor, and they had a great thing together. And the other actors, I cast out of, we shot this movie in Montreal, and we shot it in Montreal and one day in DC. And the judges were great. The 2 others that read were just, I loved them. They were just strong actors. And one of them I had actually worked with on Deep Impact, and he reminded me that I cut him out of the movie, which was, I'm really sorry, but you're here now. The one thing about this movie, I don't know if you know this, the end of the movie was not the way it was written.
You mean where we see Ruth?
Yeah.
Real justice?
Yeah. The end of the movie was a scene in the courtroom where that other lawyer is reading her brief that she wrote, that she was not, she won the big case. And then there was a scene where she's sitting in the back of this courtroom listening to her words. And I said, I can't, no, this ending does not work. It doesn't mean anything. It's like empty. It's like she's in the back of the bus. She just won. And now she's in the back of the room. I was standing in front of the courthouse steps with my DP, and we started the movie on the steps of Harvard.
Right.
And I said, I want to end the movie the way I'm just, I'm on these steps, just blocking and riffing. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to start with her coming up. I want to emulate the shots that we did in the opening of the movie. And then I want to transition to Justice Ginsburg coming in. And so we were going, oh, that's cool. That's going to be good. So I pitched it to my producers, and they mostly were on board. And then I wrote a letter to Justice Ginsburg and asked her if she would appear in the movie. And she said yes. And that was quite a day. And she did 3 takes. And when I had to do the 3rd take, because focus was not great on the 2nd, she said, just one more. It was really, it was funny.
She and George, 3 and out.
That's right. 3 and out. And
in the opening of sequence, where, and by the way, the costumes are really powerful in that movie. I mean, that blue dress that she's wearing initially and the red one that comes next. I mean, they're just, you just sort of feel the individuality of this particular character that you guys are creating, that you women are creating. And the choice to go in slow-mo, and I've noticed you use it at various times. I'm interested in when your brain says, let's do that.
It's usually, when I'm blocking, I look at a scene and I go, like the scene where Reese Witherspoon comes in to tell everybody that Hannah Schoenfeld is dead. So we have just come from a huge scene where we have found her dead. And so we know she's dead, the audience. But she doesn't. She's watching, they have fired Chip, Mark Duplass, and everyone's not happy. She gets the phone call. And when she heard the words, and when she walked back into the room, I mean, it was scripted, all words. It was scripted. And I shot it at 24, but I also shot it, and I never presented it in my cut at 24 frames. But I shot it because I just wanted to be on the back of her head. I wanted to be in her head. And it wasn't important to hear the words. The only thing that was important was to see the reactions and to feel the loss. And, it's just something that I like slow-mo. I like it.
You use
I use it too much.
You use it in that final sequence in Leftovers on the bridge. There's a whole slow-mo of those people moving, and it's extremely effective.
Yeah.
What is interesting is when one decides to do it.
I don't know. It's something that happens. It's nothing. It's something I just feel when I'm blocking, when I'm reading a material. I know instantly if I'm going to shoot it slow or to emphasize an emotion. It's rarely like, hey, you want to shoot it in slow motion? It's not like that. It's planned.
Got it. Talk about working on Luck with Dustin Hoffman and your experience with, is obviously one of the great actors of many generations. What was the experience for you?
Well, the experience of working with Dustin Hoffman was extraordinary. I mean, Dustin Hoffman, he's a master. And he likes to talk, He likes to, on set, he likes to talk. Okay. I mean, talk about the scene, but then just talk. And it's like, okay, Dustin, let's go do the scene. And that was fun. And so we would talk about the scenes once again. There's this one scene in the stables where he has his horse and we're about to do a big race. And when I was scouting the locations, I went to Santa Anita with the scouts and the DP, and I saw these, what are they called? These wraps, these white pieces of cloth. And they're what they wrap the legs of the horses with. Mm-hmm. And they were sitting there and they were blowing in the wind and they were so beautiful. And I was like, I love this. What is this? And then I said, I'm looking around and I said, okay, I know, okay, I'm going to use this. I don't know how, I don't know when. I just know I'm going to do it. So then as I started blocking the show, I realized where I was going to do it. It was going to be a scene where Dustin has come to look at his horse and ask the trainer, is he, ready to go? And, he's gone through a lot of emotional stuff with his family, with the scenes, with the whole, with everything, with the horse and with his grandson. And so I said, Dustin, there's something I want to do. It's not scripted. I want you to find a connection with this horse. And, after you're done with your dialogue, I want you to touch the horse, and let's see what happens. And then I want you to walk over to these pieces of cloth that are blowing in the wind. And I'd like to do a few shots of you there. I want to do a private moment with you. And so he knew, obviously, a private moment is something that no one would see. So he touched the horse and he started to cry. And I was like, yeah, this is happening. And then we moved the cameras over there and, I had 2 cameras going and, and he lost it a little bit and was holding it in. I kept saying, hold it in. And, and he kept, and it was just great. And it was Dustin and the wind was blowing and it's a great little sequence. And, it wasn't written. It was just something that really told the story.
Well, speaking of private moments, there's a private moment when Felicity is at the hospital. Her husband has had this, physical, health issue, and you divide a whole series of shots because she's alone waiting in this particular corridor, and I was struck by that. I mean, it really suddenly stopped me because of the different angles that you had. They were jump cuts. And I'm interested in how that evolved for you. Because you could have just stayed on one shot on her, moved into her face. She would have obviously given you the expression of concern because she obviously had it. But that's not how you told the story. And I'm wondering if you remember why you made those choices.
Well, I remember wanting to shoot it in jump cuts. I wanted to do an evolution of moments of waiting. And I wanted to detail it with her feet, her, what you do when you're sitting there for hours waiting to hear if someone is going to live or die. And so it was just written waiting room. In fact, we were running out of time and they kept saying, we don't have time to shoot this. We don't have time to shoot this. And I'm going, I'm shooting it. We are shooting it. And we shot it. And so it was always my intention to show a passage of time. And because to me, it's all in the details. It's all in the foot moving. It's all in your head going backwards. It's all in the detail of telling a story is all details.
The phrase that you just used, though, there's something really powerful because we're all in a situation of time and money. And I'm sorry, but you can't shoot it. You've got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And the question is, when do you, that's also the resilience, but when do you, as you just did, say, no, we have to do this? Or I don't know if you use the word we or I have to do this. And how you handle it, because there are going to be people who are saying,
Yeah, and there's all those people. Well, you talk very closely with your AD, and you say, "I'm getting this. I'm getting this. Go send the other camera over there while I'm finishing this." You just are thinking ahead. Okay, I'm not going to spend as much time since I've run out of time. I'm not going to spend as much time as I was going to on this other scene so I can get this moment, because we knew we couldn't get back to the hospital. That was it. And so you just start, trading off. It's when are leaving a scene at 70% maybe, when, to get a scene at 100% to get it, it's a trade-off, and it happens on all films. It happens on all big films, little films. It's always time. It's always a set you're going to lose. There's always something. It's, directing is oftentimes being bombarded with, how do, solutions. How do you shoot something you intended to shoot one way? Oh, we don't have the crane anymore. It broke. Okay. So how are we going to shoot it? You have to think on your feet. Well, I wanted a big wide shot. All right, let's get on that building. Let's, you just start dancing.
A good dancer. One of the things that the performances are going to stay with actors a little bit more, and then I want to talk about camera. But in that, again, I Live Here Now episode, there are some incredibly intense performances, and I'm wondering if any of those, from many of the actors, I don't know, I'm just thinking of Janet Maloney, suddenly realizing something that she didn't know and go through the transition. I'm wondering if there are any moments that you remember in directing that episode, dealing with the actors to help them get where they got to.
Yeah, there's this one scene. Well, there's a lot of scenes, right? It was big. I'm very proud of that finale. Anyway, there's a scene where John, the actor, I'm trying to remember his name, Kevin. Anyway, he has shot, and he has thought he has killed Justin Theroux. Then Justin Theroux goes to his alternate universe, and he comes back out. And he walks into town, gets to the clinic, and he kind of passes out on the floor. Now, this is a very simple scene. The guy walks in, he looks at him and he goes, I thought you were dead, basically. And Justin says, nope. And then he walks over to him and he says something like, I don't understand what's going on.
Right.
And Justin goes, neither do I. And it's all about these looks. And on the face of it, it looked like a nothing kind of scene. It just looked like, what am I going to do here? And the simplicity of the scene was absolutely incredible. And I just told them to take their time and to find the relief that he's alive, and to, for once, for this character to admit that he had lost control of his life, of everything. It was a big admission, and to take his time. And the actor just went to this place. I mean, this actor was incredible. And he took his time and he said that line. And I'm telling you, I was on set and I fucking lost it, because it was so powerful. And I knew that the scene had just gone to next level. And I hadn't seen before that moment that it could actually get to that level. And the actor brought it there.
What's fascinating about this is because of the issue of anticipation, which is an issue that we always face, actors face it, which is, I know what's going to happen in the scene.
Right.
I know I'm going to discover this. I know I'm going to admit it.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to be able to get them to the place of discovery, meaning that you don't know it until it actually happens. And by saying, take your time, I think is, obviously it worked for both of you.
It worked, and it was stunning. I remember calling Damon, our brilliant writer, Damon Lindelof, creator, he was in LA, saying, I can't wait for you to see what happened. I can't wait for you to see this scene. And I would never call him, say this was great or that was great. I was full of, I was elated. We all were. It
Now,
was,
I was going to ask you that question. When do you know when you got it? Now, it's an interesting question because on some level, in this moment you got it because you totally felt it. But but we also talked about that 75%. I don't have time.
yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, you just have to know it. That comes from experience. I've been directing for 100 years, and someone who's been directing for a year, you're going to want to cover yourself. You're going to go, do I have it? Or you're going to have to try and develop those instincts to really know when you have it and know when to walk away.
Got it. All right, let's talk about nudity.
What?
Nudity.
Nudity.
Because you've got naked guys and that phenomenal sequence of her entering that pod in the very finale of the Leftovers. How do you handle it? What do you do?
Well, Carrie Coon's oh God, we were so graced with her brilliance. So anyway, the script came, and I called her into my office, to talk about the scene and to talk about sweaters, and makeup in terms of the older look for the Book of Nora. And I remember we had a big discussion about the pink sweater versus the gray sweater, and then I said, listen, you have to the character walks into the machine and she's naked. And I said, I don't think it's gratuitous. I think it's what it is. I believe in it. How do you feel about it? Do you want to do it? And if you don't want to do it, I will shoot it in a way where we don't see frontal nudity. But I believed in this sequence, and I believed that it was necessary and frightening to see a woman standing fully naked, about to enter this crazy machine that was going to take her to another plane. And she said, yeah, I'll do it. Just like that. It was really, it was like, it was just like that. And because she trusted me to shoot it, to not do 10 takes of her walking down. And I also, there was one take where I didn't want to show her breasts. I framed it a certain way, and, use the wide shot to show the loneliness, the nakedness, the woman who's now a child again, and, I know she worked out a lot that week or two, and she had a tremendous body, and she was, she's just a pro. She had no problem with it.
Did you clear set? What did you do?
Yeah, I cleared set. I cleared monitors. I had monitors turned off, so that nobody could be watching it except for maybe 3 people who needed to watch it. And that was it. And then those dailies didn't go to anybody except me and Damon and the DP. And, the studio didn't even see them until they saw the cut.
Wow. And the scene with the man totally naked.
The man totally, Justin.
Yeah.
He was naked a lot. Justin would just do anything. He'd jump into water. He'd come out of water. The poor guy. Yeah. Well, he wore a cover up, and, I cleared the set. I always have private sets when there's nudity involved. People don't need to be there. Just the camera operator, focus puller can be out of the room. I don't need to be in the room,
All right, let's move to camera. And, your Emmy from an ER episode, I think in many ways must have trained you forever in how to move the camera, because there are phenomenal shots in that episode, the 360-degree shots, just the camera is moving and always seemingly appropriate. Now, as a filmmaker, you may notice them, but as the storytelling, I want to get in there, and that's what the camera's doing. Talk to us about your approach to camera itself. As you said, you study cinematography as well. what is your general approach when you're sort of looking at a scene before you actually go on, even onto the set? What goes on in your mind visually?
Well, I look at a scene and I evaluate the scene. Like, obviously, what are we trying to say in the scene? How do we want to say it? Do we want to, be with the person? Do we want to be back from the person? What does it call for? It's all about the narrative. And so the narrative speaks to me, and then I decide, okay, I just want to stay in this person's POV. I want to do this handheld, or it's just organic how I see things. Sometimes,
do you visualize when you read a script?
Yes, always. I'm like shooting it when I'm reading it oftentimes. And, for on the basis of sex, I looked at like Michael Clayton a lot. I looked at that lighting and I thought it was incredible. So Grady and I said, Grady, I want it to look like that. I love that natural lighting through the windows. It's beautiful. Let's, so, we also look at, I also like to look at film and talk about light. And so with ER, ER was a different sort of situation. Rod Holcomb shot the pilot and it was incredible. And he shot about 25% Steadicam. And then when I came on to be the exec producer on the show and director, I decided to shoot it like 75% Steadicam. And I wanted all the shots to be motivated, not just going around in circles because we can, but let's find a reason to go around, with the chaos. And so it's the story that always dictates to me, really, how I'm going to shoot it. And it's always a, discussion, like, for example, I don't know if I should tell this story.
Tell it.
I'll tell it. It's the Peacemaker. Okay.
Is that great oneer that goes upstairs?
Oh, that's not the one I was going to
tell. Okay, no. Tell the one you're going to tell. Tell the one.
I can tell you about that one too. So there was this, so we're shooting there it was after we shot the plane, that scene I was talking about. So we're shooting in this bombed out apartment building, supposed to be in Kosovo. And, I had Guy B, who's now a director, incredible director. He was a great Steadicam operator. So I had him on a crane, on a platform, doing a big wide shot. And then I had the crane come down and I had him step off and walk through the courtyard, seeing the children playing on the swings, in the poverty, and into the door. And then we had to do a dissolve because I wanted to go all the way in. We couldn't, so things changed. And then I did a 360 around the terrorist and the little piano player, who was my daughter, Hannah. She was 9 years old. Yeah, and she was actually playing Chopin. But anyway, so I did this shot, and it was incredible. I mean, I thought it was pretty damn good. So, see, this is a story I should not be telling because it's not nice. So my producer was there before he left for LA, one of my producers, and he said, Mimi, I think you should shoot this in vignettes. Boom, 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 boom. And I went, really? Why? And he goes, well, I just think that's what you should do. And I went, okay. It's my first feature. And, I was like, okay. So I shot some vignettes. They stayed in the can. I never used them. I never put it in the movie. And when he left, he gave me a big hug and he said, oh, Mimi, you're such a great director. And I went, really? Why do you say that? I mean, it's just like, it just came out. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you're telling me how to direct the movie. Why are you telling me? Don't you like the way I'm directing the movie? No. Anyway, he left. So I do my cut. I'm at Steven Spielberg's house showing him my director's cut. Anyway, showing him my director's cut. And the other producer was there. And of course, my shot, was in the movie. And after the shot, Steven starts clapping, going, great shot, Mimi, I love it. And, I'm sitting in the back with my editor, just kind of smirking. And then after the movie, the other guy producer came up to me and said, I want to apologize to you for treating you that way. Anyway, I don't even know why I told you.
Do the wonder. The one, there's a amazing wonder there.
Yes, so, we were in Slovakia and Macedonia shooting this movie, and Les Dilley, our production designer, who brilliant guy, built all of Washington, all the hallways. He did it there. And so we had to build this national security, I forgot what it's called. It was whatever the building was. And I had this wonder I wanted to do. Clooney comes in, and the guy speaks to him. I had designed the whole thing. They walk up the stairs, and I take them to the second floor, and to Clooney looking over down to where we were. And it was a really cool shot. And the set was built. It was built for the shot. And I mean, that is a luxury. And
so now the idea of that, for example, that second story, when you were reading the script, did you visualize, wouldn't it be cool to have this? And in fact, not on one stage, what if they went upstairs so they could look down at it? Was that part of?
It wasn't the script. No. I mean, I visualized it and discussed it with Les, and he said, okay, let's build it like that. And then, of course, I had to stick with my shot. You know what I mean? It was like, there's no going back. They spent all this money so you could do this shot. You better do it, and you better do it well.
Talk about camera in terms of sort of this action sequence in the motorcycles and all the cars all trapped near the end of Deep Impact, and how you designed that, because it's moving cameras. And
well, okay, that huge sequence where Elijah Wood is looking for his girlfriend. That's the scene you're talking about, right? So we're in Manassas, and Joan Bradshaw was our producer, and Casey Caldwell was our first AD, who's incredible. And they put, and that whole team, went to community centers and said, we need extras. We had 2,200 extras. They all came with their cars. They all were packed, to go running away from the comet. We had big trucks set up with first aid and water, and food, all down this highway. And this highway was going to open like in 2 days. We had 2 days on that highway, and it was going to open the next day. And so we were going like crazy. And there was no CGI, none. Those were all real cars, real helicopters in the sky. And it was 100 degrees or 106 degrees and 100% humidity. And it was a very emotional scene in the middle of all these cars where Elijah Wood finds Lily Sovietsky and the parents, one of them played by my husband, Gary Wernz. And there's a glance that Denise Crosby looks at the baby when she sees him, the decision's made. You don't know what the glance is, but they, Elijah Wood and Lily hug, embrace, and the parents come out and say, take the baby. And it was a very emotional scene. It was one of those scenes, I just did it on the Steadicam. I just kept moving. I just kept telling Lily, like, just keep saying, no, I'm not going. And no, I can't do this. I can't take the baby. And it was just, I mean, what would you do, to save your baby's life, to save take the baby to higher ground, live. And it was just one of those scenes that everyone was so exhausted and hot and sweaty, but everybody was so into it.
When you did you walk onto the set and see these 2,200 people, or did you know at least a day in advance you might have 2,200 people?
Oh no, I knew it was happening, but they started bringing the cars in at like 3 a.m, and these people stayed there. It was crazy. And then they came back the next day, most of them.
You shot on location. You shot obviously in studios. What is the decision for you when you want to be in the studio? So, for example, I guess the apartment or the courtroom in Basis of Sex, real or built, versus practical locations. I assume almost all the Australian sequence in Leftovers is all on location. When do you make a decision? I want to build.
Well, a lot of it has to do with your budget, and on the Basis of Sex, we Nelson Coates, production designer, another genius, who's working with me now, built the courtroom in a nunnery because we couldn't find a courtroom we liked or that would work, so he built it, and we cut this nunnery. It was a huge space. He cut it in half, and he put this beautiful mural, and it was extraordinary. And it's interesting. In The Leftovers, we built that house that Lindsay Duncan lived in, the ranch house. We built it. It wasn't there. It had a 360-degree view, and we shot it in this place called the Yu Yangs. And Gene Kelly was our exec producer, who had shot Band of Brothers. No, I think Band of Brothers in the Yu Yangs, and he brought us there. And we built this ranch up there. John Pino, the production designer, wonderful. And, because we looked for many ranches. In fact, I looked at ranches. I was really very much into Picnic at Hanging Rock. It was a big inspiration for the third season. And I was all over that rock, looking at every house in that area. But it just never worked visually. There were too many trees. And so I abandoned that notion, and we built the ranch there. I personally love locations. I love it. When we scouted the third season of Australia, we went to Adelaide, we went to Melbourne, we went to the Outback, Broken Hill, where we ended up shooting. We went to Sydney, and we decided to base in Melbourne. And when we were looking for the Outback, looking for the locations, right where I shot Scott Glenn watching the dancers, the Indigenous people dancing, there was no script. Tom Spezialy and I and Gene Kelly were in Australia. We were going, this is interesting. And I said, I love this place. It was called the Pinnacles. I said, because it had these little pinnacles everywhere. And I said, I love this place. I want to shoot here. I don't know what we're going to shoot here, but we're going to shoot here. And, then the script came, and I said, okay, let's go to the Pinnacles and shoot. There's a rock there. So scouting it's wonderful. You can, I would just say that, shooting in Australia was sacred. This is one of the old culture, and it was extraordinary to be there.
That scene with the Indigenous dancers, what had you been told about them, and was this a real water dance that they were doing? It's quite...
This is very unusual, because they all have their own communities and their own songs and their own dances. And 3 communities came together to write this song and dance for the show. And the day they presented it to me, it was just so moving. And we had a smoke ceremony before we started shooting on the sacred land. I mean, all of Australia is sacred land, but we all went through a smoke ceremony so that we would be blessed, and we would bless the land and promise to keep it safe. And anyway, Australia was one of the great locations I've shot in. I loved it.
Well, I'm glad you talked about making it sacred and safe, and honoring, because it's obviously one of the things that we need to continually do as human beings now, and honor the planet that we're on. That's been giving us a warning that if we don't take care of it, it's not going to take care of us. So I'm glad you went through that ceremony. we just have a couple minutes left. I wish we had much more time because I'm learning, and I'm sure those people who are with us are learning too. But advice that you would give to, and maybe do give to new directors who come to work with you, what advice would you share, maybe in a general terms or even in specific terms?
Well, I mean, I would say to a young director is follow your own instinct. Don't follow mine. Don't follow anybody's. Just, if you have a story to tell, I'm talking about if someone's directing a feature, and it's theirs, it's their baby, they've created it. It's their story to tell. And they should tell it the way they want to tell it. Don't let anyone tell you can't tell your story the way you want to tell it. And even when you come on a set that's established, a show is established, or a new director is coming on, obviously there's a style that's created, but I really encourage directors to bring something new. Surprise me. Tell the story in the way you want to tell it.
Well, Mimi, you've been telling and continue to tell stories the way you want to tell it, and have the courage to tell them even when someone is saying it this way. I'm glad you stand up for your vision because it's so effective. I thank you for the time you spent here. I wish you good luck in the season as it opens and the new world of production affects you and all your colleagues. So thank you so much for being with us, and stay safe and stay sane.
Everybody stay safe. Thank you. Be well. Be strong.
That wraps up this exclusive discussion with Mimi Leder. If you'd like to hear more from the Craft of the Director series, check out episode 262, which features director Judd Apatow discussing his filmography. Or visit our YouTube page to find discussions with David O. Russell, Leslie Linka Glatter, and Guillermo del Toro. The Director's Cut is available wherever you get your podcasts. Also, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.